The Science of the Artificial by Simon Herbert talks about how we live in an artificial world that is designed and constructed for human benefits, with goals to enhance and develop the society, and help us understand the workings of our complex psychology. He touches upon the complexity of economy, biological systems, computational design, cognitive thought processes, and how they operate. He explores the idea that we are a function of our environment, and that everything he defines as artificial is a replication of how things behave and how things are formed within nature. We are a depiction of our environment, and it can be seen in the way we design the artificial. He talks about the fundamentals of computation and how we can use it to predict behavior. The complexity of these systems are used to analyze and explain how things work in a modern world, both on a micro and macro scale. Computation can be used to explain how humans act, think, and intelligently adapt to our given and problem environment. All the ideas explained within this book can be applied to architectural design, with the thought process around decision making, how we use the digital environment to predict, analyze, and create, and also how we implement this to benefit the future of our society. The idea and construct of the artificial is seen all around us. Devices used for human benefit in our society, our architecture, and in our homes. We use the artificial as a tool to aid us with human development. There are a lot of similarities in the form the artificial takes. We use nature as a direct construct, as inspiration to design for the domains we need. Both nature and the artificial, however, still have to abide by natural laws. Simon Herbert uses a comparison between farms and streets to show although one appears to be more natural, they are both designed for human benefit. Throughout the book, he makes reference to the inner and outer environment. The inner is defined as the interface of the artifact, the substance and its organization. The inner is capable of attaining goals in a range of complex environments, whereas the outer is represented as these complex surroundings and determines the conditions for the goal to be obtained. He describes this through the properties of a clock. A clock will only function depending on the efficiency of its internal mechanisms, the inner, and the position where it is placed. The inner system has to respond to the needs of the environment and is also limited by this. Computational means can be used to simulate the internal and external environments, which can fundamentally be used to predict behaviors. Simulations are a valuable asset in the production of the artificial because they can tease out new assumptions and knowledge by using a set of parameters to discover elements surrounding a specific environment. They make relationships between a problem or behavior and the environment. The use of computers also allows us more control with manipulation to properties but still abide by physics and natural law. An example of these simulations are the prediction of the weather and how we can prepare for this. These simulations can be used as a tool to understand our behavior in complex problem environments. Chapter 2 is a direct example of how humans react in a problem environment such as the economy. This environment is fundamentally defined by decision making to attain beneficial goals. Our economic aim is to maximize profits, which can be seen as a computational ability. The outer environment is seen as a behavior within the economy, and our inner environment as our individual goals and our thought processes to achieve these. In order to achieve these goals, we turn to computational methods such as artificial intelligence as a form of selective search to aid in human judgment. The operation of the real world is impossible without the aid of computation. When humans make decisions, we aim for the optimal, but are almost always happy with the satisfactory alternative. We concern ourselves with the level of aspiration and levels of achievement when it comes to decision making. We can explain this process using the theory of games, especially in the world of economics. It can be used as a prediction of behavior through our perceived rationality of our competitors. The prisoner's dilemma explains how people try to outguess one another and try to both achieve the most satisfying solution. The diagram explains the amount of years taken off a prison sentence if they were to confess or lie in a situation. If they both cooperate, then they both receive a moderate reward. If they lie, then they receive no reward, and if one lies and the other confesses, then the aggressor gets a larger reward. This dilemma shows cooperation achieves a satisfactory response, and it's more appealing than the optimal. Within society, there is a depiction that we have loyalty to the organisation we are a part of, and we position the goals of the organisation above our own. In a hierarchy, which will be covered further later on, we are more willing to optimise the organisation through their influence, and the idea of not wanting to disappoint the group. We are bounded by rationality and we accept the behaviours that correlate to our group. We are an adaptation of the environment that stems from the rationality of people. It does not matter if people are 100% satisfied, as long as the decision is met, then it is optimised. In Chapter 3, Simon Herbert talks about the psychology of thinking. He starts with an analogy of an ant and its journey to obtain food on a beach. He records the ant's path and notices that the path is not straight because of the obstacles presented to it on the beach. Here, it is seen to adapt into the environment, and the path it takes is a direct reflection of the complexity of the environment, not the complexity of the ant itself. These features are reflected in how humans behave, as we can be seen to be a direct result of the environment that we inhabit. These characteristics can apply to how we act in problem situations. Problem solving is described as a search throughout a vast maze of possibilities that describe an environment. We are limited by our inner systems in the ability to solve through our memory and our cognition, something that is not reflected in the use of computers. We are serial processors, not parallel, and are limited by our memory capacity. As a result, we develop search strategies, such as trial and error, which involves creating and testing an idea to try and find a solution. If there is no solution reached after evaluating, then the process repeats itself until a satisfactory solution is found. We do not have the sufficient means of storing information in our memory to develop quick, efficient strategies unless the representation of the problem is slowed in order to give us time to access our storage. In order to enhance our memory and develop our ability to solve problems, we must be able to transfer the information from short-term memory to long-term. This process is known simply as learning. A memory is generally organized in association, in lists, in hierarchies. We are able to retain information from levels of meaningfulness because of the high levels of association, which aids us with the effects of fixation. An example of this is your alarm in the morning. We associate that sound with waking up and a feeling of tiredness, which is why people sometimes feel distressed when they hear it in different situations, but it brings them back to the feeling of waking up. Another factor is that people in their specific domains are very good at specific recognition. Grandmaster chess players have the ability to store vast amounts of moves, techniques and strategies because they have an association to that domain. In addition to this, behavior is a function and is said to be a learnt technique. Another example of this is linguistics. The caption, "I saw a man on the hill with a telescope," can be interpreted in numerous ways. It is only when associating this caption with a picture does the meaning of the caption give it structure. The picture has been internally represented and has organized the way we think and perceive things cognitively. Within Chapter 4, the book delves deeper into memory and discusses the complexity of how we can process information. We've discussed that information needs to be transferred from short-term memory to long-term in order for this information to be retained. Memory can be seen to be similar to a library with a large storage of information and rapid access to this information. The process of memory tends to operate through the influence of our outer environment by real-world experiences, and again, remember because these experiences create association to place. A doctor, for example, has a process of recognition that is enforced from memory and knowledge of that domain, but also uses the search processes to resolve doubts and determine an absolute diagnosis for symptoms. Associated information have similar patterns. Memory and solving a problem environment can be seen as an open file, where the process is that we think immediately, recognize the situation, and appropriate an action. Memory is a responsive system with the knowledge of certain solution residing in the long-term memory. Despite having this access to retained information, the memory will change through adaptation for response to the real world. As mentioned previously, this is known as learning. Learning is a permanent change in the memory's capacity to adapt to an environment. New problems need discovery and require new way of representing the problem environment in order to adapt and acquire new knowledge and skills. Through learning new behaviors, it explains how we adapt to daily problems through access to prior knowledge of the situation. To summarize, the human brain is an extension of the environment in which human thought processes take place. Memory enables systems to operate efficiently. The domain of science is associated with the natural, how things are and how things come to be, and the area of engineering is associated with the artificial, how things are designed and how they ought to be. The combination of science and the artificial led to domains changing. This led to the science of design emerging in the 1970s that draws upon computation and computer science. Design can be met with the adaptation of ordinary declarative logic meaning, which is the process of solving problems. This can link accordingly to computation because designing a declarative process will enable the program to solve problems without specification of an exact procedure. The inner environment is represented as a set of alternative actions to a problem known as command variables, whereas the outer is represented as a set of parameters. An example of this is the computation of a chess program that uses brute force computation, the analysis of millions of variations that is aided by prior knowledge of chess, for example, opening variations and evaluation of position. The book continues to focus on the design process. The process involves generalization of alternatives that are tested against a whole array of requirements and constraints. This is characterized by generators and tests, generators for the decomposition of design problems, and tests that find consequences of decisions, which divides responsibilities for the designers. The worth of finding a satisfactory solution over the optimal plays a role in design as well. Designers to incorporate cost and budget, which means a design has to take into account alternative paths to find solutions that are satisfactory. This can be aided through the use of computation in order to predict and provide further representation. The evolution of the artificial can be evaluated through theories around social planning and how we plan for the future. The plans we see in society are based on the social and political arrangements, and the construction of these plans are a success of human planning. Despite this, there can be implications because of the poor communication of information and resources. The problem is not to provide information to people, but to allocate the time they make to receive information. This will aid decision-making and planning more efficiently. The professional role of the designer is highly compatible with rational behavior, and it is the decisions they make that influence the behavior seen within society. Society is made to fit human habitation and improving human living and behaviors through the design of social planning. This data and information can be used to predict the future. It can provide reliable information about initial conditions, about the process and resources used, and also make predictions on timescales. The success of human society relies on the provision of food, shelter, health, and happiness, and in order to provide a satisfactory future, we need to make good actions of the past. There is a powerful cause and effect when it comes to designing any artificial product, because there will be consequences of the designer's actions. The final design goals are limited by the ability to predict the future, but we aim to lead successors and inhabitants to the knowledge of what came before, and create new alternatives for the future as well. Simon Herbert goes on to talk about alternative views of complexity, which focuses on chaos, catastrophe, general algorithms, and cellular automata. To start, we live in an age of anxiety, and there is power to produce complex answers through complex questions. The theory of catastrophe is a special kind of system that deals with the classification of nonlinear dynamic systems according to behaviors. A catastrophe occurs if there's any changes within the system parameters that lead to instability. These apply to most natural systems within the world. Chaos systems, however, are deterministic and are also dynamic systems that if initial conditions are disturbed, it will lead to unpredictable behaviors. We can, however, use computers to help predict these behaviors in order to prepare for chaos. Examples of these systems are natural disasters. The future can be managed even with the instability of chaos and catastrophe systems if we give ourselves time to react. The emergence of complexity led to the development of computational approaches to evolution from generic algorithms. The generic algorithm can be characterized as an organism that is represented by a list or vectors of features. An example of this is natural selection, and the vector can be measured by level of fitness. These are set to change through reproduction and mutation. By using computation, we can build programs that model the process of evolution and calculate how rate of fitness grows. We can also produce reproducing systems that simulate evolution. Simon Herbert finishes the chapter stating that complexity is too general of a term. These topics are not the study of the specific complex structure, but the phenomena of complexity. Sticking with complexity, the frequency of complexity takes hierarchy form in a subsystem that has more subsystems, and there is a relationship between the structure of this complex system and the behavior of its subsystems. The hierarchy is integrated with subsystems, each with a hierarchy in itself, and these subsystems are usually subordinate through authority, especially within society. The number of subordinates who report to an authoritative figure is called a span of control. Social hierarchies are defined through interaction and the intensity of this interaction between subsystems. The system needs a constant interaction amongst the components, and if there is a change in the system, then it will inevitably affect the other parts as well. We can see hierarchies in most complex systems. They can be referenced in organisms on a microscopic scale and macro scale. Simon Herbert identifies complex systems to be an evolution of similar simple systems. This can explain why we have flat hierarchies such as the system of a diamond that is far less structured in an hierarchical sense compared to society. To summarise the findings of the book, the theories of complexity can be expressed and applied to many aspects of our artificial created world. We can see it in nature, in evolution, in the way we behave, and in our society. We can analyse and develop our understanding of these topics and predict our behaviours by analysing the comparison between the inner and outer environments, and using the beneficial aid of computational programs and systems. The book takes the meanings of the words artificial and complexity and establishes a deep-rooted understanding to how these elements are constructed or designed, why they are designed the way they are, and what makes us as humans behave and act the way we do through this complexity, and the need to achieve goals using the artificial.